Hey guys, welcome to Squadron pre-recorded. This is normally Squadron Live, but I'm away this week and not able to be here live with you. So I've pre-recorded this interview with my good friend Peter, and we're going to talk about 3D artwork. He creates 3D artwork for book covers like our in action books from Squadron. He does box art for model kits for companies like Eduard. Most recently, he did the box art for Eduard's 48 scale B17F, the Bloody 100th edition. Just a fantastic work of art. And we're going to just talk for a little while about his world of 3D art and how he creates these images that we all see and enjoy. And it's kind of interesting. I really enjoy it. I hope that you perhaps learned something that you did not know before about how some of this modern artwork is created for these box arts in a world where we're no longer using paintbrushes but computers. So I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday night when I'm live again at 9 o'clock on Wednesday. But for this evening, sit back and enjoy hearing Peter and take it easy. I'll see you next week. Hello, Peter. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I always refer to you as Peter Four because being from South Georgia, I'm not quite sure if I can pronounce your last name correctly. So tell us your full name, Peter.
It's Piotr Forkasiewicz.
All right. Well, there you have it. And I'm just going to call you Peter if that's okay.
All right, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. You do 3D artwork, but take us back to perhaps when you were younger. What got you interested in doing what you do now?
Um, all right. First of all, thank you very much for having me this in your podcast, and
Absolutely,
I must
love it.
say that Squadron is have has a very special place in my heart. But I will mention this later.
Okay.
And I'm Piotr Forkasiewicz, and I'm a illustrator, military illustrator, and I work for scale model companies and publishing houses, game developers, etc. And I work for Eduard company, HK models, DBMK models, Arma Hobby, and others. Okay, I live in Poland, and I was born in 1978. So during my first a few years of my life, I lived in a communist country. We were behind the Iron Curtain, and this is quite important because of that we had a very different perspective of view on different stuff. And so my interest in aviation, in military aviation, started when I was when I have just few when I was about 8 years old, when I watched Battle of Britain movie,
Mm,
and I fell in love in aviation. So because I lived in this communist country, our perspective on military and the history was very specific, because we were forced to see things through the Eastern perspective. Also, because of we were behind the Iron Curtain on the eastern side, the country was very poor that time, and since until 1989 um, we were forced to live in that reality, actually. And after this time, the door to the west uh, were opened, and we finally could have an access to books and stuff from the west, which is very important to me. Um, so I was very interested in aviation, in movies. I loved Battle of Britain, Memphis Belle, Flight of the Intruder, and all those films have a great impact on me. And
Mm.
um, so, as I mentioned, we we didn't have an access to the West culture, West books and stuff. So mm, when I was a teenager, I was spending an hours in bookstores, libraries, and antiquarian bookstores, looking for books that could expand my knowledge in military aviation. And um, after 1989, we were flooded with the books from the West, and the
Mm.
first hobby stores started to show up.
Oh,
I
nice.
remember that time I was again spending a lot of time in those stores. I couldn't afford to buy those books, but still I was spending a lot of time there. And I remember from that time that this was the first time I saw Squadron books,
Oh, okay.
and these were the best books available that time, and I have a great sentiment to those. And today I'm actually buying every Squadron book I can see. And then when you um, contacted me a few years ago and asked me about the possibility of cooperation, it was for me. It was something super special. Um, um,
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I remember when we first started talking and first met. I remember you telling me, a little bit about remembering Squadron books as as a young man, and just I said, "Well, would you like to create an artwork for our next book?" And you're like, "Yes, yes, yes." So that was great.
yeah,
So growing up not having access to these hobby items, as we all know now, whether it be books, whether it be model kits, then all of a sudden you had access to these. You found Squadron books and others, I'm sure. So by this time we're up in the early '90s. In heading into the 2000s, how did you transition from simply being interested in this aviation, military history, this artwork? How did you transition into thinking, hey, I think I could really create these kind of images, this kind of artwork? Where did you go next? How did you learn what you now know?
yeah. I was very passionate about the scale modeling and aviation. So when my father was bringing me scale models from Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia at that time, um, I was collecting not only the models but also the illustrations from those models. I can actually have some with me. I was cutting out those box arts from boxes actually,
Oh, nice.
and so I remember that I was reading one magazine in Poland, and there was an article about James Dietz,
Okay.
and suddenly I noticed there's a completely new way of visual storytelling, because we were used to our Polish painters who were painting some battle scenes from the very old battles, with the horses and knights
Right.
and stuff. And I never thought that painter can paint something modern, from
Right.
for example, World War II stuff. And when I saw James Deed's paintings in this magazine, I was just blown away that someone is creating paintings, so beautiful paintings, but in completely different about completely different subject. And so James Deeds was this first inspiration for me, his paintings. And also we have a very famous Polish painter, Jarosław Wróbel, who is most well-known military painter in Poland. Um, and yeah, his paintings made a great impact on me also.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I was creating, I was collecting the scale models, I was doing those scale models. But I remember that when I was assembling those models, the thing that was missing here was just this. um, I didn't like to put the model on my shelf. I I prefer to assemble those models, go to the football field and just burn them to just play the air battles and stuff.
Okay.
So, and that's why I decided to create an images, because okay, so maybe I will explain about my technique, because many people who sees the artworks, they say, for example, okay, this is nice painting, but I need to explain this is not a painting.
Okay.
It is not a traditional painting. I base on 3D models that I make, or sometimes I need to buy those models, but I base on the 3D models. And this technique is more similar to photography. But if we agree that that the photography is capturing a reality that exists, my techniques is like a photography that capture the reality I need to create. So
Okay.
that's why I need to create models, scenes, um, and then capture that scenes and this virtual reality. Um, and so this technique that gives me this possibility to, like, take the model and put it into some scene. When I'm creating also nowadays films or animations with those models, it gives me another opportunity to um, to create the battles, not only just put the model on my shelf.
Right. Now,
Um,
and then let me ask you this,
mhm,
Peter, or mention, and you can elaborate on this. When you mention take these models,
mhm,
so when we have or when you have a 3D model,
mhm,
it's on your screen. You're looking at it. It's not painted, if you will. It's just
mhm,
perhaps gray.
mhm.
And you can take that model and you can spin it to any angle and
Yeah,
see any side. But then, just like a model, you have to paint it, you have to colorize it, you have to apply the what we would call decals in the model world. You have to put the markings on it. So you still have to create this image. Or this model. You're just doing it on the computer in 3D
yeah.
as opposed to a physical subject. Is that kind of
Y-
correct?
yes, I start with just a cylinder, just a cylinder in 3D software, and I cut it and I extrude it, bevel it, and chamfer it and stuff. Uh, and this way I create the whole model. Later on, I need to paint textures for this: color texture, bump texture, reflection texture, specular texture. That's to and create a shader that looks like a surface of a real real object. When the model is ready, I need to create a scene around it. I need to put a lights, uh, put the environment sometimes, then set up the camera, render, and I usually render the model against the transparent background, so I can a freedom of creation later in Photoshop that I'm using,
Right.
and that's how the illustration comes to life. Actually,
Okay.
yeah.
So when did you start learning how to do this? What was the timing when you realized this is what you wanted to do, and when you started learning Photoshop and the various softwares that you use now, about when was that in your life?
Well, it was about 24 years ago when I was
Okay.
studying, and yeah, before that I was creating images with a just with a pencil of brushes.
Okay.
It was very traditional. Um, I was creating the images in traditional way, but at some moment I wanted just to be more detailed. I wanted to create animations also, and that's why I decided to switch to 3D, because 3D gives a great freedom of, as you said, you can spin around the plane, you can look for some very good angles. So it gives much more control on the scene. And
Right.
um, before that um, I found a book that also had a great impact on me. It was a bomber story by
Okay.
Len Deaton. It is a fictional story about the Royal Air Force combat bomber command mission. And although um, despite this is a fictional story, it has very vivid descriptions, and I had this book everywhere with me, and I was creating storyboards, I was creating scripts about some scenes, and I started to create an illustrations. And when I was in USA in 2002, I was working um, in California, and I was very close to industrial light and magic area,
Okay.
and I wanted to participate in the ILM internships. And when I go back to Poland, I started to create those 3D images. I was creating one image per day just to participate in those
Okay.
internships. Of course, nothing happens. I didn't participate in those, but I had a after I during my studies I was working on my portfolio very hard. So when I finished studies, I had a I I could get a job very quick, and even though I was working at the beginning as a 2D designer, I was designing visual information systems,
Hmm.
logos, and stuff like that. I always tried to reach the third dimension. So in after a few years, I get a job uh, in a company um, that was creating 3D visuals. This was architectural visuals.
Okay.
I finally could learn more about this. I had um, my friend Piotr who ran the company. He actually taught me everything I know about 3D, about the lighting in visuals, about the cameras and stuff. So at that time, I started to mm, create more and more military stuff, and those images were um, mm, some companies were interested in having those images, and
Okay, so the things you were making to this point, they started to be published, if you will, and they were available online, and people were starting to see your work at this point.
yes, well,
Okay.
when I began the illustrations, I created the images for the bomber story, and I created one image that showed a bomber stream at the sunset.
Hmm.
And I remember that I posted this image on one forum, and I get a letter from UK from a former Lancaster gunner who wrote me that when he saw this image, it reminded him exactly the scene he remembered from the wartime when he was in his rear turret and
Oh,
he
wow.
saw this stream of bombers behind them. And from that time, I started to publish the images in the magazines, and I started to get more and more works from veterans and families of veterans. Uh, mm, and in 2014, there was the moment that I decided to create my own company
Okay.
and stay at home with my kids and also work. And although I was still creating 3D visuals, architectural visuals, more and more projects were about the military stuff.
Okay.
And after a few years, I visit. I went to Telford to this, big scale model
Mhm.
event, and there I met people from Eduard company, and after that I started to create box arts for companies like Eduard.
Okay. So Eduard was the first company that you were doing what you do now for then.
Yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
Well, that's pretty awesome. Now, fast forward to, when we got started and got working together, you're talking about how you create the models in
Hmm.
3D, and
Hmm.
then you have to create a scene, and you had to create a background
Hmm.
and this kind of thing. So I'll pull up. This is from your ArtStation. So if you go to Peter's website, which is peter4.com, there's a link there. You can see his ArtStation, and I'll pull it up here. So here is the first image that you did for us here at Squadron.
Hmm.
Let's see. And this turned out to be the front cover of our FA-18 Hornet and Super Hornet in action book. So I remember when we first started working together and we were kind of going through, what I wanted. And of course, at the time, I had no clue of your workflow and no clue how you do what you do. And I know a little bit more now, but walk us through how you came up with this scene, because if I remember correctly, this background, you told me this was actually a real image that you shot with your real camera when you were on a flight to go somewhere. So how did we get from a 3D model of an FA-18 to this? Walk us through the workflow here, so some of these guys that may not understand how a 3D render ends up looking so amazing,
Hmm.
how do we get here?
Yeah. So this specific case, the model wasn't mine. I need to purchase this one, but it was this is quite easy project because the when the model is ready, it is just a matter of creating a proper lighting and try to match this with the background. The actually the yeah, as you said, the photo was taken. I took with my camera when I was flying somewhere.
Right.
I'm very um, mm, yeah. Every time I fly somewhere, I take hundreds of photos of the bu- of uh, Jesus.
Of whatever you see that you like.
Yeah, exactly. But in this, in
Okay.
the case of the second image, on the aircraft carrier, I created this deck with the details, um, added, steam in the post
Hmm.
production. But as I said, this was quite easy because I had the model. But usually, I don't have the model, and uh, since I want to have control on the detail, I create the models by myself mostly
Okay.
nowadays. Yeah.
Now, if we go back to your page here, of course, we can see
Hmm.
uh, quite a bit of things you've done for us so far. There's the F-14
Yeah.
that you've done. Of course, their F-111. Now, you even did the UFO model
Hmm.
for us, the Hanabu.
Yeah.
Uh, but I know if we scroll up a little bit,
Hmm.
let's see, where is looking for one of your Lancasters. I'm sure they're in here somewhere. Perhaps I'll scroll down. And the reason I want to point out your Lancaster is because if I if I'm not mistaken,
Hmm.
the Lancaster is a model that you created, and you're talking about your animations,
Hmm.
and am I correct? This is your 3D model that you created that
Yeah.
you used for animations,
Yeah.
in addition to just images, right?
Yeah. Well, the Lancaster was my first model I ever created, and this is funny thing because my first illustration I made for a magazine uh, led me to my good friend nowadays. Um, I posted some image on one of the forums where there was a lot of traditional artists on this forum, and below my image, one of guys who replied to me was Mark Postlethwaite, who is a
Okay.
traditional painter, very famous British painter who creates unique paintings, mostly aviation paintings. And Mark mentioned that he saw my illustration in a bookstore in Poland, and I was surprised because he was. I knew his artworks very well, and that he's a British painter, but he replied that he lives in Poland actually. So he has a Polish wife, and we met very soon later. And Mark offered me an opportunity to work for him and for his publishing house. So we started to work on the Lancaster Dumbuster monography, um, and Mark provided me a lot of great details to my model. And so Lancaster was my first model, but later on I decided to when I learned how to create models, I started to build my own, not only Lancaster but mostly American bombers, because I love those planes. And yeah.
Right. Now, I'll pull this back up here because this is really neat how you've got this. So what we're looking at here, of course, is the final result. To look at. That's nice and realistic and everything. But then as this video goes,
Mhm.
it's going to show what you started with. We were talking about the background
Mhm.
with nothing there, and then we get to see just the wire frame of the 3D model.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about your 3D model before it's painted, before it's colorized,
Mhm.
that right here, there's what we're looking at. That's kind of what we're talking about. So when you're creating the 3D model, this is kind of what you're looking at. You're creating this wire mesh that then, as the video will show in a moment, then gets to be painted.
Yes.
And it's a long process, I'm sure, but this video you've put together here is a nice, quick representation of your workflow.
Yeah. Well, the creation of 3D model is very time consuming. In case of Lancaster, it took me about 9 years
Oh, wow.
to create this model, but you have to remember this, that I created the also a very large part of interior of this plane,
Right.
and you can see this in this Dumbuster Lancaster monography.
Mhm.
but but usually it takes um, about few weeks to create a model with proper detail, because
Right.
this technique that I'm using, the disadvantages of this technique is that in CGI there is nothing like, well, CGI is super sharp. There is nothing like paintbrush
Right.
in traditional painting. Traditional painter can paint something and the and hide some details under the brush stroke, and this gives some mystery to the image also. But in CGI everything is super sharp and you have to have the detail, because if there is no proper details, everything looks very artificial. There is a
Mm.
one rule that I learned from one of the ILM industrial light and magic artists who said that when he's creating a model, he's adding the detail that you will probably not see. You will not notice this detail, but if he missed this detail, you will notice this.
Right.
You know.
Well, it's kind of funny. In some ways, I see some similarities in what you have to do on the computer in a 3D world. I see similarities with what modelers work on the bench, because
Hmm.
you talk about your Lancaster took you 9 years, but you say that most models you create you can achieve the results in just a few weeks. Model kits are the same way.
Hmm.
You can spend as long as you want super detailing and adding upgraded parts, um, until it's perfect,
Hmm.
or you can build something out of the box in just a few days.
Hmm.
Uh, so I can see that with your 3D models, you can probably spend as much time as you possibly want to, because there's always something that can be upgraded and something that you can do a little bit better and a little bit better.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
so
Well,
that's that.
the main difference is that in computer graphics, there is nothing like a scale limitation, because
Right. Okay.
even if you are very talented traditional modeler, there is there are some limits with your sight, with
Right.
your hands, and
Yep.
but in CGI you can create every detail you can imagine, because you
Right.
can be closer and closer to this
You can
detail.
zoom in as much as you need to.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's funny you mentioned the guy that said that details that he adds will never be seen, but
Hmm.
if he doesn't add them, it'll be seen. And it's the same way in modeling. I mean,
Hmm.
how many times have we built a model with a full interior
Hmm.
just to close the interior up, never to be seen again?
Yeah.
But sometimes if you don't build that internal structure, the whole
Mm.
model will fall apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, so you've built your. I know your Lancaster is one that you're probably most proud of, but and then on the F-18 Hornet, you talked about you bought that
Hmm.
model.
Hmm.
Um, so when you say you buy a model, so obviously there's other 3D artists out in the world, and this day and age, they're a dime a dozen. They're everywhere. And so I'm assuming that you've got a lot of friends
Hmm.
and people that that do the same type of work that you do. And I believe I've heard you talk about sometimes you trade models with some friends. So
Yeah.
do you have a group of guys that you, for a lack of a better way to put it, that you work with, that you bounce ideas off of, and uh, you see what I mean? Is that kind of something that works for you? Do you got friends that you work close with in the 3D world?
Yeah. Yeah. I work closely with Adam Tubi, who's the
Mhm.
artist of the Airfix company.
Okay.
We are friends and we switch the models from time to time because
Okay.
in this branch it is very hard not to use someone else's models
Right.
because to match deadlines and new projects, sometimes I need to I need to buy models, but since
Right.
I work s- uh, since I want my images to be recognized as mine, I I try to do this very rarely. I
Hmm.
try to build the models by my own. You know.
Well, and I'll tell you this too. Just when I look, I'm very familiar with your artwork now. And as I scroll through,
Mhm.
I it's my opinion that you have a signature style, and even if the 3D model is not yours,
Mhm.
when you buy a 3D model, you still have a lot of work because you've got to, for example, this is your model. I know that you made your own B-24, but if this were not your model, when you buy it, it
Mhm.
doesn't come with Silver Babe on it, and it doesn't come with this scene, and it doesn't come painted like this. So
Mhm.
you still have a lot of work to do once you receive that model.
Mhm.
You've got to do all the stuff that the customer recognizes in the end.
Yeah.
So there's still a good bit of work. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Also, when I work on image and I get a brief and I need to work on the image, I don't want this to be an easy job,
Right.
because every time I get a brief and I need to create an image, I want this to be a challenge for me because I created about 100, I think, images of Spitfires. And if this was like an easy job, I
Hmm.
would be bored with this, I think. That's why I want to introduce some new tools. I want to introduce some new look, new angle to to have fun with this work. And this is important because when you
Right.
are creating a you know image number 100 of one machine, for example.
Hmm.
So and I also, I'm not sure if I understand this correctly, but in
Okay.
English, to earn money, it means to, you know, I want to be, I want to earn those money, not
Right.
just to make money, but earn
Right.
those
You
money.
want to earn. Yeah. You don't want it to just be given to you.
Yes, exactly. That's why I
Right.
want to put some a little bit more to this to the image, just
Okay.
just to complete it. You know.
Well, I think that type of attitude shows in your work because they're not basic. The designs you do, I really like them. So, and I think a lot of others do as well.
Thank you.
Now, scrolling through your artwork on the ArtStation, obviously lots of aircraft, lots of really nice aircraft. But let's see.
Hmm.
You see other things too. We see ships. Let's see. I know that. Okay, here we go. This is one of my favorites. You did the box art for Magic Factory's new 700 scale Gerald R. Ford carrier.
Hmm.
Um, and this just is really neat how you've got the entire scene.
Hmm.
So obviously, everything we see, it's all 3D. All
Yeah.
the guys on the ship, all the planes. So is a project like this,
Hmm.
you talk about taking a few weeks sometimes to do an aircraft.
Hmm.
Well, this has several aircraft
Hmm.
on it in addition to a ship. So does a project like this, is this more difficult for you, or is it just a matter of more time? Or
Hmm.
because as you zoom in,
Hmm.
I'm sure that each one of these planes is not super detailed to where you would use it for one image,
Hmm.
but still you've got every one of those planes painted up. You've got the individual markings on them. I
Hmm.
mean, to me, this looks like a pretty complex project.
Well, it was complex, but I think that I spent more time on posing those guys on the deck, actually.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
But this was the example of how I deal with the challenge, because
Right.
I wanted to do this. I wanted to add those details.
Okay.
For example, right now I was working on the B-17 for Eduard, and
Hmm.
I spend a lot of time on posing the gunners at the guns. Maybe not in this image, but the others posters for Eduard.
Right.
I really uh, paid great attention to people inside. Actually, this
Right.
is something I am learning from James Dietz, because James Dietz paintings are full of people, and this human elements in picture, it it gives a lot.
Well,
It adds
it
a lot
brings
to the image.
it does. It brings the image to life.
Yeah.
It gives the equipment or the machines a sense of scale.
Yeah,
Uh, you
absolutely.
know,
Yeah.
you you mentioned not having a sense of scale in the 3D world because the scale is infinite. It's whatever it needs to be. But this really adds that element, and I like that.
Hmm.
Now, you mentioned, we'll talk about this for a minute since you mentioned it. Anybody that did not know who you were before Eduard released this, they know who you are now because this has been a very, very popular kit that Eduard produced. Of course, this is the Bloody 100th B-17
Hmm.
kit in 48 scale from Eduard. Uh, how how long of a process was this? Obviously, you knew about this before any of the rest of us did because you had to create this.
Hmm.
Uh, so how was this project for you? Did it turn out like you were hoping? I think a lot of people really really liked how this box art turned out.
Yeah, I created the model a long time ago, actually, but every time I create a B-17 artwork for Edward, I know this will be a longer job, because Jan Zdiarski, who is my friend and he works in Edward, he's an expert in B-17s, and I know that the requirements for such a image of B-17s are a few levels higher than in other cases.
Right. He's definitely going to make you earn it, right?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. I spend
Well,
much more time on B-17 image for Edward, for sure.
okay. Well, I think it turned out really nice for sure.
Mhm.
Uh, now we let me pull this up. This is one thing that I know a lot of people are curious to see how it turned out, and this is the B-17 image that you did for us,
Mhm.
and uh, I really kind of
The-
like how this turned out. So let me get this pulled up real quick. Uh, and I don't know why I can't do it. Here we go.
This is the image I'm truly proud of, because I know that I spent a lot of time on research about this particular machine, because it was a machine that was flown by John Lucky Lakadu,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted this to be accurate, so I made the research using John Lakadu's book, to be sure that this machine that I'm showing here, it shows uh, um, it shows John's story accurate.
Well,
Yeah,
and there it is.
yeah. It shows
So,
that it shows John's B-17 Sunny 2 on a very
mhm.
specific day when the rest of his crew ended their combat tour. Um, yeah, so this is very special image for me.
Well, and the interesting thing that or at least I think is interesting about the way that you do a lot of your artwork is, I know sometimes I've asked you to do a certain image and I'll say something like, yeah, just put a B-17 in the sky and make it look cool. And you're like,
Hmm.
okay. And you do that and it turns out nice. But I know that what you really like to do is you like to tell a story and portray a particular story. And that's exactly what you've done in this one. And it's in Lucky's book, the Damn Lucky book.
Hmm.
He describes this story exactly. And you basically took his story from his book
Hmm.
and brought it to life in 3D.
Yeah,
And that's really neat. And of
yeah.
course, at the bottom, we told the story here in the text in the bottom of exactly what this is. Um, so it's really nice. I think that turned out really nice, and we're going to offer this as a poster very soon.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
We live in very specific time when there are many experts around, and you know that every picture that you are creating, or anything you do, will be judged by many people who knows the
right,
story. And I remember that the first paintings I saw in the books were just some generic images of planes. But nowadays you have to be very accurate in terms of history, and because you know that many people will see this and judge this, and so you have to be really prepared to uh, create accurate image.
oh yeah. Well, I think you nailed it with this, and the name of the image is very accurate. Not lucky yet.
Hmm.
Referring to the fact that the rest of his crew got to go home, but he had to continue on for a few more months.
Hmm.
And then of course the plane you've got in the background there, Wild Cargo.
Hmm.
That was this was Wild Cargo's last mission because it was damaged and
Hmm.
of course ditched in the Atlantic. So it's a nice image that you've created, and I love that that's what you do, that you take a story and you bring it to life. And I know sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes it's just simply an image of, I mean, you could take this same aircraft, Sunny 2,
Hmm.
and you could put it in any scene and it would
Hmm.
be a nice image. But the fact that this image is a nice image that goes with the story is just a little bit of extra.
Yeah.
So I really like that.
Hmm.
Um, is that, and I guess I'm saying that right. That's what you prefer to do. You would prefer to have an actual story come to life versus just a pretty picture.
Yeah, well, I would like to create some generic images because they are easier to be done. In
Not as much research, right?
in terms of the research, but Yeah, I like to be prepared and well briefed before I create an
Right.
image. Yeah.
Well, it's like this one.
Mhm.
That's just a generic picture of a savage.
Yeah.
Very nice. Nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. 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 Hmm.
So that's great.
Hmm.
Uh, so let me get back over here. I think I closed the wrong screen. Bear with me here. So if we pull up, oh, there it is. Going back to your art station.
Hmm.
Let's see. There we go. So you talked about doing mostly planes, and then of course we saw the ship, and I've seen some other. You do a lot of really neat stuff with the U-boats, uh, but you scroll through your art here, and you've got some tanks.
Hmm.
You've got some other things. I know somewhere in here I saw something that was really, where's it at? Really off the wall.
Hmm.
Uh, so how often do you venture outside of aviation, which I know is your main interest,
Hmm.
to do other things, be it, naval or uh, armor related or whatever? How often do you find yourself doing non-aviation?
Well, quite often, but uh, as my time is limited, I try to pick up the jobs that I'm best prepared for. But
Right.
the one that you showed was created for the board game, and it was
Okay.
it was great challenge for me because I had to design those things like submarine, two types of submarines, and some compartments for from those submarines. So I have a great freedom of creating this. There were
Okay.
no some very specific requirements per those, so I could really play with this project. I
Okay.
actually, if you look carefully at the interior parts or even exterior parts, you can see there is some, for example, this black and red submarine. You can see that this tower is created by B-29
Oh,
uh,
okay.
nose.
Now that you mention it, yep. Okay.
Yeah, and there are gun turrets from B-29.
Ah, okay.
So yeah. I could
Very
I
nice.
could
Okay.
play. Yeah, there are some car engines I created in the past. There, so yeah, a lot of things. Yeah,
All
I
right.
had
Well,
great fun with this. Yeah.
and I guess it's one of those things too, because I know you're the kind of guy that likes to learn and challenge yourself. So I assume anytime you get outside of aviation,
Hmm.
to some degree, it's a challenge and it's a learning time.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
There's I even created 3D illustration for a book that was used in primary schools in Poland. Yeah, so yeah,
okay.
very different images from
Well,
time to
that's
time.
good.
Hmm.
Now, now I'll tell you one thing that uh, you and I are kind of working on is this new. Uh, it's a B-24 book,
Hmm.
and we are bringing back an oldie but goodie name out of the Squadron archives, the Planes, Names, and Dames
Hmm.
book series, and the original Planes, Names, and Dames books were nose art books
Hmm.
with basically just pictures of different aircraft nose arts.
Hmm.
And that's kind of how this book started, I guess we can say. And but it's kind of expanded into much more than just that at this point.
Hmm.
Uh, but as far as what you're mostly doing for this book is creating these images and uh, everything that you've done so far. I'm pretty excited about. Do you have the front cover there on your screen, Peter, that you can share? That this is a work in progress. It's not finished yet, but this will kind of give you an idea of
Yes,
what it's going to look like.
here it is.
Right here, I'll pull it up.
Hmm.
There we go.
Yeah,
Yeah, so there's what you're working on there.
yeah. And this book is a really great challenge because every single liberator that we show in this book is a different type of liberator. So I probably created a dozen of different types of liberators now. You know, every B24 JH uh, with those uh, turrets in the nose, they
Right.
is a different type. So this is a huge challenge, this project, to be honest. But I love it. You know, I love this plane, and creating the mm, other modifications of liberators is a great fun. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think it's really going to turn out to be something pretty spectacular because, uh, like you said, you're having to create all these different variations because the B-24 there were so many different variations. They kept changing it and kept adding and upgrading and doing different things.
Yeah.
And so in this book, the reader, the modeler, is going to be able to, of course, see dozens, if not hundreds, of amazing artwork that you've prepared. But then also, in addition to that, every plane that's going to be featured in this book will be available on a decal sheet that will come with the book.
Yeah.
And then you'll have, we've got side profiles being prepared that, for the decal placements and things. So it's really going to end up being kind of like the ultimate modeler's guide
Mhm.
for building B-24 models, because you're going to be able to see virtually almost every variant of a B-24 from different angles and different views. And I think it's really going to be nice. So, we'll save all the pictures for the book, but I'm sitting here scrolling through them right now. The ones that you've finished so far, they're pretty great, and I'm excited to show those to people.
Yeah.
So,
Can't wait while those artworks are ready to go.
oh yeah,
Mhm.
it's going to be good, and
Yeah.
hopefully it works out well, and we can follow up with a B-17 shortly after.
Yeah, I think this will be a little bit easier because there
Yeah,
are not so many modifications as I
right.
I have a book with me which is a bible for me about
Okay.
the modifications of the B-24s.
Oh gosh.
And I
Okay.
thought this is all, but recently I discovered that there were some differences between the B-24s, even from the same production lines, that were going to the 15th Army or 8th Army. There were some differences even between those. So
Wow.
this is
Well,
a
see,
challenge.
that's really good of you. That instead of just throwing an image out there, you actually care about your images and you want to research them so you can get them as accurate as possible.
Yeah.
So I really like that about you for sure.
Hmm.
Um, So, is there anything else you wanna mention about what you do, what you're interested in? Any, of course, the B-24 book is a huge project for you. Are there any other big things that you've been working on? Any more 9-year projects
Um,
that you got going? What else can you tell us about?
no, recently I just make more of animations and films because last year my director Andrew Panton from UK and me, we finished a film after work 7 year long work on the um, it was a film about attack on Sorpedam. It was an episode from the Dumbuster story, which is well known. Um, and this was, I think, the biggest challenge for in my life, because we created a 54-minute long film, and I was responsible for all visuals in this film. So
So this Lancaster flying here, this was all your animation.
yeah, everything from model, textures, scenes, post production, was done by myself. Andrew recorded an actors against the green screen, which I later on put into the scenes. Yeah, and we successfully showed this film last year in UK, and now it is shown um, all over the world, I think, because
Oh yeah.
we donated this film to International Bomber Command Center in Lincoln, and they are arranging screenings of this film.
Mm, okay.
Yeah, so
Well, I think it turned out pretty fantastic. And and how long did you say that you guys worked on this?
about 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah. At the very end of production, we had a great help from Bath University, uh, and they helped us with the digital actors, motion capture, and again that added a lot of life to this film. So this is
Right.
not a CGI animation, but also something more, I think.
Okay. Well, that's great. Is that is that something that you really enjoy? Do you see yourself doing more of that kind of work in the future?
Yeah, I'm working now on a few film projects, and what I would like to do is um, to visualize a story from my one of my favorite books, which is Wrong Stuff by Truman Smith. This is
Okay.
about 385th bomb group in UK, and
Okay.
the story that he's telling in this book is fascinating, and there are some scenes that I would like to show in animation one day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to seeing that.
Okay.
Well, Peter, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up. I appreciate you being here today and telling us a little bit about yourself and walking us through your world of 3D images.
Thank you very much
Yeah,
for having me here.
absolutely. I look forward to seeing the next work of art by you, and it's really great being able to work with you, and I look forward to doing quite a bit more work with you in the future for sure.
It's a pleasure to be part of Squadron now.
Well, we certainly appreciate you and your good work. So we'll let you go for now, and we'll talk to you next time, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you very much.